Ready for a deep dive today? We're really getting into it with Osho,
Oh, yeah.
a spiritual teacher with, well, some people might say some pretty out there ideas about desire and the ego and all that.
Right.
We've got some excerpts from his Book of Wisdom to dig into.
Okay.
So should we just jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Osho, he doesn't really shy away from the big questions.
No, he does not. He's definitely willing to go there.
And he often flips those conventional ways of thinking totally on their head.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You think you're going one way, and he is like, let's go this way.
Exactly. So he starts off talking about desire and, well, I mean, honestly, desire, it gets kind of a bad rap sometimes, right?
It does. It does.
But Osho, he calls it the seed of all. Even God's desire to create, to expand, that led to, well, I mean, everything, the whole universe.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder why desire gets such a bad rap.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and what I think is so fascinating about what he does with it is he kind of challenges us to think about our relationship with desire in a completely new way. Like he says, clinging to desires, it's like a fire, but it's choked by smoke, right?
Okay.
It's only when we can kind of let go of that attachment to the outcome, to the thing we desire, that we can actually experience the real power and the energy of desire itself.
So it's not about pretending we don't have desires, but it's more about changing how we relate to them.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of what that would look like?
Yeah, sure. So let's say you're I don't know, you're really striving for a promotion at work.
Right.
You might be spending months, even years, just consumed by this desire to get that new title, maybe get a bigger office.
Oh, Lord.
But Osho would say, well, what if instead of fixating on that outcome, you're really focused on developing the qualities, the skills, the dedication, all of the things that would allow you to naturally kind of rise to that level of success. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's the joy then comes from the process of the journey, that continuous process of growing and learning, rather than from reaching some far-off goal.
That's such an interesting way to think about it. It kind of takes the pressure off, needing things to go a certain way, and it allows us to really be in it, be in that process of becoming.
Exactly.
So how does this idea of desire, how does this connect with the ego, which is another big thing that Osho talks about a lot?
Yeah, well, he sees the ego not as inherently bad, but as a tool, right? Like a construct that we create to help us make sense of the world.
Right.
He has this really interesting way of describing it. He compares it to those concentric circles that you see in the lake. Each ripple is unique, right? But they all come from the same source.
Right, right.
So similarly, we have our individual identities, but those identities all stem from a shared universal essence.
So it's on the surface, we're all these separate ripples, these separate egos.
Right.
But underneath it all, we're actually all connected to something way bigger.
Exactly, yeah.
So how do we tap into that? How do we access that deeper level, that space beyond the ego?
Well, Osho would say that we can get glimpses of this interconnected reality in those moments when the ego kind of dissolves a little bit. Think about deep sleep, or when you're feeling intense love, or maybe when you're in that creative flow. Have you ever felt that sense of losing yourself in the moment?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's it. That's a little taste of our true nature, that place that's free from all those limitations that the ego puts on us.
I've definitely had those moments, when I'm so absorbed in something that I totally lose track of time. I even lose track of myself. It's an amazing feeling, so freeing. So if those moments give us a taste of what's possible, what's beyond the ego, how do we get there more intentionally, more consciously?
Well, that's where the whole idea of the here and now comes in.
Okay.
Osho really emphasizes this idea of presence as the key to kind of loosening the ego's grip.
Right, because the ego loves to dwell on the past.
Right.
Rehashing old stories or projecting into the future.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Which just creates more anxiety.
Exactly.
But how do we actually live in the here and now? It seems kind of abstract,
Yeah, well, he tells this really wild story
Okay.
about a man who walks into a bar, eats a glass.
He eats a glass.
Yeah, eats the glass, and then just casually strolls up a wall.
Whoa.
And everyone's just standing there in shock.
Okay, that's definitely a new one. Sounds like something out of a movie.
Right.
So what's the point? What's he getting at?
So Osho uses this really bizarre image
Okay.
to show how much our preconceived ideas, all that mental chatter we have about what's possible, what's impossible,
Yeah.
it can actually blind us to the miracles that are happening all around us, literally right in front of our faces. So it's about breaking free from those limitations, from that voice in our head that says, this is how it is, or this is how it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The people in the bar are so stuck in their expectations of how reality is supposed to work
Right.
that they totally miss the extraordinary. Right.
Totally.
Osho's challenging us to like approach life with that sense of childlike wonder again,
Yeah.
to actually see the present moment as if it was brand new.
I can see how that connects back to the ego dissolving.
Right.
When we're truly present, we're not caught up in those stories the ego tells us
Totally.
about ourselves or about the world. It's just pure experience.
And that pure experience, that's where we find real freedom, and aliveness.
Yeah.
It's about like really savoring a cup of coffee, appreciating the sunset, truly listening to a friend, all without judgment, without needing to analyze everything.
It sounds so simple,
Right.
but honestly, in our world, like, everything's so fast-paced, so hyper-connected, it can feel really hard to actually cultivate that level of presence.
For sure.
Did Osho offer any, like, practical tips on how to actually do this in our everyday lives? So we're talking about, like, shifting our perspective, really trying to see the world with fresh eyes. But what about, like, those parts of ourselves that we tend to judge or that we want to, like, reject? Our doubts, insecurities, even that ego, that we've been talking about.
Right. Well, Osho actually says something kind of radical.
Okay.
What if these so-called flaws are actually like raw ingredients
Okay.
for transformation?
Interesting.
He compares it to alchemy, that idea of turning base metals into gold.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So instead of pushing down these paths of ourselves or pretending they're not there, we could use them as fuel for growth.
Exactly. It's a very empowering way to think about it.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like we often focus so much on just wanting the good and rejecting the bad.
Right.
But Osho's saying that really it's about embracing the whole experience, the whole spectrum.
Exactly. It's in that tension of opposites, doubt and trust, fear and courage, even desire and detachment. That's how we discover our full potential.
It's like a muscle. You need the resistance to grow stronger.
Exactly. Exactly.
So as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive on Osho's wisdom, what's one key thing you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
You have a choice.
Yeah.
In how you relate to your experiences, to your desires, even to your own ego. And by really being present and embracing all of yourself and seeing challenges as opportunities, you can unlock a level of freedom and fulfillment that you might not have thought possible.
It's about recognizing that potential for alchemy within all of us, right?
Yes, exactly.
So next time you're facing a challenge, instead of judging yourself or resisting it, ask yourself, what if this is actually an opportunity? What if I could turn this into something valuable, something to learn and grow from?
I love that.
Some good food for thought today. That's a wrap on this deep dive.